So welcome to the show. Welcome to the Daily Shred here on a Thursday afternoon. My name is Jim Schultz. I am going to be your tour guide this afternoon. Man, I really hope you guys are doing pretty well out there. I hope you guys are just crushing it with your physique goals, whatever they may be. And hopefully we can help you a little bit over the next 10, 15, 20 minutes. Yeah, that's what the Daily Shred's all about. We're just trying to, it's kind of like the monthly shred at this point, but we're trying to get it to a daily frequency at some point, man. So hopefully at some point we can do that. But hopefully these next couple of minutes, next 10, 12, 15 minutes, we're going to help you guys out in terms of your training. What I want to focus on here today is going to be your training split. So let's talk about your training split. Let's talk about how long you should stick with the same training split. If you guys have been following me for any length of time, you kind of already know how I feel about this subject. And so it's not going to come as a huge surprise where I want to go with today's topic. But nevertheless, hopefully there'll be a couple of nuggets along the way. The number one best way that you can support what we're doing here on the Shred is you can leave me a comment, right? Comment down below, hit me up in that chat box. I would love to connect with you all here today and kind of see where you guys are at. I'd love to know how long are your training blocks normally? Like how long do you normally stick with the same training block? Like how long do you normally go with the same exercises before you kind of switch things up? So let me know. I would love to know that there in the chat box. So, all right, so the first thing, right, I've got a nice little graphic that we've created for ourselves here today that I'm going to bring up on the screen in just a second. But the first thing that we want to understand, if you maintain the same training split from 1 week to the next, if you maintain the same, exercise selection, the same exercise order, all of those things from 1 week to the next, here is what's really cool about that. It becomes very easy to identify your progress or lack thereof from 1 week to the next. Like your logbook just becomes super clear, right? It's plain as day. You're either making progress or you're not making progress. Your loads are either going up or they're not going up. Your reps are either going up or they're not going up. Your total volume is either going up or it's not going up. Your time under tension, your form. There's a number of different ways that you could, measure and analyze making progress. But it just becomes really, really clear and obvious to identify if that's happening or not. And guys, just to be real with you guys for just a couple of minutes, sometimes simply not losing is winning, right? Like sometimes simply not regressing too badly is indeed winning. And so, James, I see your comment in here. I can't bring the comments on the screen today because my technology has failed me. But James says, previously I would change my programs when I hit a plateau. And I think that's a good marker, right? I think that's a decent marker in the sand. But I would also say that sometimes that can kind of motivate us, motivate you, motivate me to change our programs a little bit too quickly. Right? To not push through those plateaus, to not grind through those plateaus. And we're going to kind of see this in just a couple of minutes as we move through the discussion here today. But sometimes it's just about getting in there and getting after it, right? Like what I'm going to focus on here today, it's very systematic. It's very much, the optimal approach. Sometimes we're in a season of our training where, just getting in there consistently is progressing. Right? Sometimes we're in a season of our training. We're just getting in there, 3, 4, 5 times a week is indeed making progress for where we're at in our lives, right? Sometimes we can't always beat the logbook. Sometimes we can't always, eke out these extra reps or eke out these extra loads. Like sometimes just getting in there is the best that we have. And so we want to be mindful of that, right? Typically just getting in there and getting after it is going to fix a lot of things. Like typically, if you just get in there and you put work in and you get work done, then you're going to be okay. You're going to be perfectly fine. But for those of you that maybe you have been stuck in a rut, for those of you that maybe you haven't progressed in a while, and for those of you where your physique kind of looks the same as it has or did, 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 18 months ago, right? Like what I'm trying to focus on here on the Shred is, what I'm a big champion for, which is physique development. Right? It's not necessarily strength. It's not necessarily speed. It's not necessarily overall health. Right there, I said it. It's physique development. right? Which, typically if we get a little bit leaner, if we get a little bit more muscle, we are going to get a whole lot healthier. So there is that nice byproduct. But that's what I'm focused on. That's what I'm putting all my chips in the middle on, which is physique development. So with that as our end goal, right, we want to be mindful of how we are structuring our training. We want to be mindful of, how we are progressing or not progressing from one week to the next. So with that being said, let's kind of bring up the graphic that we have here today. And let me know what you guys think. I'd love to know how long you guys normally go before you kind of switch some things up. So what I've done here is I just threw up, let's say you got a chest and an arms day. Like, let's say you're training chest and arms, so maybe this is like a Monday. I mean, it sounds like a pretty good Monday, right? That's a pretty good Monday, pretty good beach day. Some chest, some arms. Maybe you're doing some barbell press, some dumbbell flies, some dumbbell curls, and some skull crushers, right? You set up your barbell press. It's just a typical 4x6. You got your dumbbell flies that are at 3x10. You got your dumbbell curls that are 3x9, and you got your skull crushers that are 3x12. So this is your week 1 setup. Let's say that on your barbell presses, on that week 1, on your last set, you're able to get 225 for 6 reps on that last set. If you stick to the same program, if you stick to the same training split for the next, 12 weeks or maybe even longer, what you're very likely going to see is a progression that might look as follows. By week 3, if you move over to that second column there, you might be hitting 225 for 7 on that final set. Even though it started as a 4x6, maybe you're able to eke out an extra rep on that final set. And then by week 6, you're doing 225 for 8, right? So now maybe you've added a couple of reps to that last set. It's very possible, right? Very realistic, very modest, right? Nothing that's crazy, nothing that's out of reach. And then maybe, on that last column, like week 12, maybe you've added a little bit of weight. So now you do 230 for 6. And so look at how this started. It started with 225 for 6. Now you're hitting 230 for 6. I mean, this is like the definition of progressive overload, right? I mean, just to kind of hop on the soapbox here for just a second. And then Ryan, I see that you've dropped the question, and I'll get to that in just a second. This is progressive overload. Like when we typically think of progressive overload, every single one of us, myself included, we gravitate towards our loads increasing. We gravitate towards getting stronger. We kind of think, all right, if I'm progressively overloading, I should be getting stronger. I should be pushing heavier loads. I should see the weights go higher. Well, there are plenty of other ways to progressively overload, but this is the most traditional way that we all think about this. Well, if you're doing the same split, from one week to the next for a long period of time, you're giving your body a chance to progressively overload because it knows what to expect. It's set into this groove from one week to the next. There are no surprises. The motor units are ready. The wheels are greased. The joints, the tendons, the connective tissue, like it's all ready to go. So Ryan, do you think it's more progressive? Do I think it's more beneficial to progressively overload on reps or weight? That's a really good question. So if we let's go back to the graphic here. I'm going to use my aid to help me answer that question. If you actually look at the second exercise, so let's look at the second exercise. So like dumbbell flies, maybe you set that up as a typical 3x10, right? And you start off with, using the 35-pound dumbbells for 10 reps. And then by the 3rd week, you're cranking out 12 reps with the 35-pound dumbbells. By the 6th week, you're cranking out 13 reps with the 35-pound dumbbells. By the 12th week, you're cranking out 15 reps with the 35-pound dumbbells. Again, this is not crazy stuff, right? I'm not expecting that you add a rep every single workout. I'm not expecting that you add, 2-3 reps, every single week. That's not realistic. Sure, if you're a beginner, that can definitely happen. If you haven't trained seriously for a while, that is going to happen in the beginning of your program. But it's not sustainable. It's not something to expect for the long term. So I didn't want to set up, examples that are just unrealistic just to kind of make my point. So Ryan, you asked a really good question, which is better? Do we add loads or do we add reps? And the answer is both or either. And it really depends on a lot of things. So I'll give you a couple of things to think about. the first thing that I think you need to be aware of is your overall health and your injury status. So here's what I mean by that. If there are any areas on your body where you just have nagging injuries, or it could be a shoulder, it could be a knee. Like right now, my knee is kind of down for the count, and I'm rehabbing my knee, and it's not super fun. And I'm actually still waiting to have the MRI done to see what's going on down there. I know I didn't break anything, and I know it's nothing major, but the doctor wanted to see like where the strain or whatever actually is, and so I'm kind of waiting on that. But if you have an injury on your skeleton somewhere, on your frame somewhere, I have found it's much, much, much better to try to add reps rather than adding load, if you want to add anything at all. Like this is a great example. Ryan, I'm so glad you asked this question. This is a great example. If you're injured, if you're hurt somewhere, just getting in the gym to train anything sometimes is a win, right? Just getting in the gym to just get it done to some degree is a W, right? Like that goes in the win column. Like, sure, maybe you're not increasing loads. Like, sure, maybe you're not increasing reps. But man, you're getting it done in the way that you can get it done. So keep that in mind. That's a little bit off topic, but since I'm dealing with an injury right now, it's kind of front and center in my own mind. Where each day I'm kind of like, yeah, man, I got something done today. Sure, we only did some forearm curls, but hey, we got something done. But if you're not injured, like, do you add loads or do you add reps? It sort of depends. It depends on the exercise, and it depends on where you're at in the cycle, and it depends on what your body will allow you to do. And what I mean by that is this. There are some movements, there are some exercises, like your major compound lifts that are just, they're primed and they're ready for more loads. Squats would be a great example. Deadlifts would be a great example. Bench press would be a pretty good example, right? On these movements where you're recruiting multiple muscles to move the weight, you're ready to increase loads. Like your body is just naturally ready to increase loads. Now, I'm not saying you're always going to be able to increase loads, and I'm not saying that this is going to be the case for everybody, because it's not. Like for me, I can increase loads on squats and deadlifts, I don't want to say easily, but it's not too difficult for me to do that. But on my bench press, it's very difficult. It's extremely difficult for me to do that. And so other people have kind of the opposite scenario. But because you're using multiple muscle groups, you are kind of primed and ready to increase loads. So I would start with that, assuming that you're healthy. When you're using more isolation exercises, like a dumbbell curl would be a great example, right? Curling 30 pounds for 8 reps, jumping to 35 or 40 pounds, which are like the next steps higher, like those are huge jumps, right? Those are huge jumps for your biceps muscles to move from A to B. And so it's not that realistic to expect us to be able to increase loads on our isolation exercises that easily, right? Like dumbbell kickbacks. It's like, man, you jump from the 15-pound dumbbells to the 17.5s on dumbbell kickbacks, it's going to feel like you're moving mountains. Like it's going to feel like, man, I can't even move this thing, right? And so it's sort of exercise specific. And so that's the first level of context that I would apply to that. So hopefully that kind of helps you out, Ryan. And so, James, can you progressively overload too quickly or not fast enough? Oh, that's a great question. And this kind of, it's such a good question. So I actually did a shred. If you go back on the, let me think, was it a shred or was it a podcast? Man, I do, I produce a few different things. So sometimes it's hard for me to remember where it was, but I want to say the episode I'm thinking of specifically was actually a podcast. So if you go to our podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, it's on all the major platforms. You'll find a recent episode I did, Am I Training Hard Enough? What I talked about on that episode was how to determine if you are training hard enough. And this is it's not exactly what you asked there, James, but I think it's going to help us kind of get to the answer. And it's basically this. If you are in a situation where you are able to progress from one week to the next, then that indicates that your volume and your intensity is probably at a pretty good level, or it might even be a little bit too low. So in other words, James, we're kind of reverse engineering your question here, right? So like if I if you find yourself always progressively overloading, like from one week to the next, like you're constantly adding weight, you're constantly adding reps, you're constantly adding volume, and it's like, wow, like this is crazy, you're probably not training hard enough because there's just too much room. Like normally, you know, we shouldn't be able to do that unless we're a total beginner, right? And I know having worked with you and talked with you, James, you're not a total beginner. So that's probably not going to be the case for you. And so that means if you find yourself always progressively overloading, then the first thing I would check and I would audit is your intensity. Your RPEs are probably not high enough. So I would ratchet those RPEs up a little bit. And I think that would help you, help you a lot. Once your RPEs are on point, there's no black and white answer. There's no hard and fast rule for how quickly and how fast you can progressively overload. You know, some things are gonna shoot up quickly. Some things are gonna take forever to progressively overload. And again, going back to my own personal example of like squats versus bench press, I can push my squats pretty hard. And you know, if I give them a lot of attention, I can add load and reps and everything pretty quickly. My structure is just, for whatever reason, it's just set up for squats, you know, them glutes though. But my bench press is not the same thing. My bench press, it takes me a really long time to add anything to the mix. And so everybody's a little bit different. You're going to find some muscle groups and some movement patterns progress a lot more easily than others. And so that's going to be kind of my answer to you there. So hopefully that helped you out a little bit, James. But man, that's just a great question. And so Ryan says, I really wish I could, I totally bossed you, man. I really wish I could get these comments on the screen. Normally I can, but it wasn't working before the thing started. So Ryan said, awesome, thanks. I agree. And most of my compound lift squats especially can build up quick, where my more isolated bench and arms are much slower. Yeah, I'm the same way, man. Exact same way. So Gabriel, hey Gabriel, thanks for popping in today. I appreciate you checking us out. Hey doctor, I wanted to get started in going to the gym and everything, but I don't know where to start with diet and exercises. I'm 5'8", a 175-pound male, and I used to play varsity soccer for my high school, so I've been. Hey, man, honestly, so I'll give you two things to think about. One is a general statement, and second are some free resources that you can download that will help you right away. The general statement is this. Just keep it very simple. Keep it very simple. And by very simple, I mean very simple. Right? From a training standpoint, I would honestly just do a full body session 3 times a week. Or maybe upper body, lower body, 4 times a week. Upper body, lower body, upper body, lower body. Either one of those structures or splits is going to work really, really well. And I would just choose basic compound lifts, right? The things that you've done before, having been an athlete, squats, bench, curls, overhead presses, rows, all that stuff. From a diet standpoint, man, let's see here. There's a lot of ways we could go with this. If you want to keep it really, really, really simple, like really simple, I would just do this. If it comes in a box, don't eat it. If it comes from the earth, then go for it. I would do that. That would be a great way to start. If you want to go to maybe the next level, then I would do that, and I would also start to weigh your food. I would go on Amazon, I would drop $20, and I would get a digital scale, and I would start to weigh your food. Is it an investment? Yes. Is it a pain in the keister? Absolutely. But is it going to completely change the way that you view nutrition? Yes, it is definitely going to do that. So those are my general statements. But my more specific statements, hey, go down into the description of this show right now. The downloads are there. They're totally free. I got the fat loss formula. I've got my competition training that you can swipe from 2017. If it's not down there, just click on livefcube.com and it's right there on the homepage. It's totally free. It'll give you a lot of training ideas for how to set up your split and your diet and all that stuff. In fact, the fat loss formula actually walks through like exactly how to do that. So, all you have to do is give me your email, your precious email, so I can spam you every single day, and then you'll have the fat loss. You'll have the fat loss formula. So, so hopefully that helps, man. But yeah. So getting back to the graphic here, great questions today, guys. This is really, really good stuff. So if we take a look at, these different things, right? We see our dumbbell flies, we're adding reps. You go down to the dumbbell curls, we're adding a couple of reps, right? We're doing the 30s for 9, and then week 3, still the 30s for 9. Week 6, the 30s for 10, and then, week 12, the 30s for 11. And then our skull crushers, we progress, right? 85 by 12, 90 by 12, 85 by 12, 95 by 3, even a little bit of regression in there, which happens from time to time. The reason why I want to bring this up is pretty simple, and it's pretty straightforward. If you maintain the same sequence, this is very important. This is extremely important. If I maintain the same sequence from week to week, then I give myself the best chance to progressively overload. However I want to do that, right? You can do that through load. You can do that through reps. You can do that through time under tension, right? You can change the tempo of your reps a little bit if you want to. You can do that through greater range of motion, right? If you find that your form is a little suspect on certain exercises, like maybe you're alligator arming your rows, or you're alligator arming your overhead pull downs, or whatever the case may be, right? It's like, well, you can stretch out that range of motion a little bit, and that's progressive overload, right? And so that's a really, really good way to think about this. Loads, reps, time under tension, range of motion. You can do this a number of different ways. But the important thing is this. This is probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make all the time. They change their workouts too often, too frequently. Right now, again, if you just want to get in there and get after it, and you like changing your workouts, you can do that, and you can make progress doing that. It's not my favorite approach, though. It's not my favorite approach, and here's the reason why. If you do bench press first one day, you're warmed up, you're ready, you're loose, you are just set and ready to drop some bombs, you're going to have a lot of energy for your bench press. If you go in there 2 days later when you bench again, but this time you start with rows and you start with, lateral raises or whatever, and you do your bench like third or fourth or last, it's like apples to oranges, man. It's not even the same thing, right? And so it's like, you're benching 225 for 6 on that first day. On that second day, you're doing 185 for sets of 10, right? Is that better or worse? It's totally different. You don't even know. Like, you can't even gauge if that is better or worse. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes, right, the gym is crowded and you have to switch things up. Like, I got it. Like, that's real life. But most of the time, that's not the case. Most of the time, we're able to do things in the sequence that we want to do them. I suppose some people maybe, they get in the gym and it's so busy all the time that they just have to take what the gym, has to offer them. And man, I pray for you people. That's tough. That's a tough draw, man. Real tough draw. So a couple of comments. So Ryan says, real food, not too much, mostly plants. My go-to easy diet. Yeah, man. I mean, it really is. There's nothing wrong with food in a box. It's perfectly fine. But if you just want something really simple, Gabriel, like something kind of simple to get you back on track, your lean meats, your lean proteins, chicken breast, turkey, lean beef, eggs, egg whites, those are all great. And then your fruits and your vegetables, right? Your fruits, your vegetables, basically any fruit, any vegetable. And then, some grains, some oatmeal, some rice, some sweet potatoes, all that stuff comes from the ground. So you're perfectly fine. And then Gabriel said, thanks so much. I'm going to start with that alternating body weight upper and lower 4 times a week and avoid food in boxes processed. It's a great starting point, man. It really is. And grab the fat loss formula down below, man. I think it'll really, really help you. And it'll give you some structure to follow. So I don't know, guys. I hope this kind of helped you guys out, kind of talking about training splits. Great discussion today, man. This was really, really good. I'm really trying to get back into the shred on a more regular basis and get out here at least a few times a week. Sometimes we can go live. Sometimes we'll have to do kind of a pre-recorded deal. But when it comes to training splits, I think one of the best decisions that I made with my own training was to stick with the same program for a very long time and to only swap things out when I felt like I had to, because I was maybe injured or I had nicks and dings and just a nagging elbow or a shoulder or a knee like I have right now. And so by sticking with the same splits for about the last 4 or 5 years, I think that that's what's helped me make the biggest changes to my physique. And I think it helped me win the novice title in 2017, helped me almost turn pro in 2017. And I think I'm hoping that it will help me maybe finish the job here next year. Next year is when I'll be back on stage. And so, if you want to know one of my secrets, that's not really a secret. I guess this would be one of them. So, but that's it. That's it for the shred today, man. You guys are the absolute best. If you haven't done so already, hit this video with a like on the way out. That would really, really help. And if you're brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing. We got fitness, we've got faith, and we do a little bit of finance here and there, but I do so much finance with Tasty Trade that I pretty much do fitness and faith here on the F Cube channel. So I hope you guys have a really great Thursday afternoon. And that's it. I will see you guys.